Hey everybody, how you doing? Tom Barnes here. Stories from the 78. Baseball in full swing here in the United States of America. We are in month number 2 or 3 technically, because I guess we did start some of the games in March. But here in Chicago, we are blessed to have 2 baseball teams, the White Sox and the Cubs. Cubs, the second oldest ballpark, with Wrigley Field opening up in 1914. I believe old Fenway Park in Boston is 1912, and old Comiskey before they tore it down, I believe 1907 ish, right around there. I'm not 100% accurate. I'm not a Sox fan, so I don't know. But baseball stadiums, if you ever been to any, specifically the ones with the huge tiers like the Astrodome or Dodger Stadium or old Yankee Stadium, or if you were blessed enough to be over at the Polo Grounds in New York City, um things changed throughout the years, and it divided people up, all these different tiers, and all the way baseball has transformed in the 20th century and beyond is just the way it is now, and money buys everything. And my friend Seth Tannenbaum discusses some of the beginnings of all that with this fantastic read here. This is Bleacher Seats and Luxury Suites, democracy and division at the 20th century ballpark. I welcome Seth now to the program. Seth, man, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing well. I just finished up your book, and I got to say, like, it really makes you think about. I mean, baseball's such an interesting thing. It's like the America's pastime, but maybe not perhaps for all Americans to get so easily to and enjoy baseball games together, though.
Yeah, I'm really glad that's your takeaway from it. I mean, that's one of the key things that I want readers to walk away from is recognizing the ways that sport and baseball in particular in this book can bring us together, but where the barriers are that prevent that from happening for everyone or all the time or in certain situations, all of that.
Yeah, you use a couple of or a few ballparks as examples. You might running through them a little bit and why you chose the specific ones, because I mean, if anybody's ever been to them, they'll know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've been to old Yankee Stadium and Dodger Stadium, never been to the Astrodome or the Polo Grounds, but and then there was another Camden Yards I've also been to. So I've kind of seen a lot of what you're talking about. But if you wouldn't mind, just kind of go through like the book a little bit and why you even like how this even came to be, because it's such a unique aspect of looking at the baseball going experience.
Yeah. That's a very big question. I might talk for some
Sorry,
time
it's
now.
okay. So I tend to do
No,
that. I apologize.
yeah, I'm happy to do that. So I guess let's start at the start. I went to graduate school not to write about this. I went to graduate school to do something else. I wrote a research paper on that and realized that I couldn't really go further. There wasn't like a book's worth of material there.
Mhm.
And I had just taken a course on consumer culture history and I'd taken a course on food history. And I started to think about where those things intersected. And for me, as a baseball fan, it was, oh, ballpark food. I want to talk about hot dogs. I want to
Yeah.
talk about what goes on with people wanting to buy that, $60 hot dog that weighs 14 pounds and can't actually be eaten by a human being. So I started with that. And from there, I began to expand out to look at the whole experience. And in sort of chronological order, the ballpark uses the Polo Grounds, the original Yankee Stadium, Dodger Stadium, the Astrodome, Camden Yards, and then I briefly touch on Truist Park in the
Mhm.
epilogue to unpack the whole experience. And the reason I went with those ballparks, it's really the reasons I went with those ballparks,
Sure.
is that they are a combination of important and impactful things that were copied by other later ballparks, but also they have a really good source base around them, which enabled me to get into them and write about them. So I used the Polo Grounds as the place where the frameworks of the fan experience were really established and firmed up, right? That you go to the ballpark and you cheer along with
Mhm.
people you don't know for the home team. And it's where hot dogs became popular and common and where a lot of the norms were set because New York City, then even perhaps more so than now, was the center of national media, but also the center of baseball media. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
all of the explanations of this is what is expected, this is what is normal, were shaped by people who were going to the Polo Grounds. And from the Polo Grounds, I then go on to talk about Yankee Stadium, the first ballpark to really be called a stadium, the first ballpark with 3 tiers.
Massive old ballpark. Yeah.
Yeah, right. The and in talking about Yankee Stadium, I talk about how some of the time constraints that used to limit working class fans from going to games went away once you get legal baseball on Sundays, right? People who work 6 days a week can now go to games on Sundays, and once you
Yeah.
get night games, right? People who work day jobs, they can go every day, or not every day, but they can go more regularly.
Yeah, I learned from you in the book. Sorry to interrupt, but that
No, please.
I didn't know that you couldn't play baseball on Sundays, especially out like in the Northeast for up until like the 1920s. It was illegal.
Yeah.
I had no idea, and I thought, I mean, I've read a lot of books and watched a lot of documentaries. Ken Burns all the way through, you know what I mean? So like, maybe I forgot or I didn't know, but that's an incredible piece of history.
Yeah, and it wasn't the case, in Midwestern cities. The Puritan ethic, right, that said no, we can't do anything else on Sunday. That was really powerful in Massachusetts, in New York, in Pennsylvania, right? That doesn't happen to the same extent in Ohio and Michigan and Illinois. So it is very regional, as you were saying. But, and this isn't, maybe this is in the book, and I don't remember, but the National League, when they started, aware of the fact that some of their cities, it was legal and some of the cities it wasn't, they banned Sunday baseball in the National League when it first started in the 1870s. They said, we're not doing this at all.
Interesting.
So, yeah. And in talking about Yankee Stadium, right, once you get lights, then all of a sudden you need more ways to separate the masses from the elite. And they install like clubs basically underneath the grandstands that are accessible only to people who have field box seats and things like that. And those divisions really happen. And again, it's Yankee Stadium, so there's lots of documentation, but also the Yankees, some of the papers, some of the sort of corporate documents from the Yankees are scattered around in various archives. There's some stuff at the Baseball Hall of Fame. There's some stuff at the New York Public Library. And having access to those documents was really useful. From there, I pivot to talking about Dodger Stadium, which is both an outlier and a norm setter. Dodger Stadium was the last ballpark to be constructed with private funding, last major league ballpark to be constructed primarily with private funding until the late 1990s.
Isn't that something?
And it opens in 1962. But, I mean, it still receives all sorts of municipal support. Walter O'Malley basically trades, I think it's 7 acres of land that has an old aging ballpark in it in an increasingly Black and Latinx neighborhood of Los Angeles for 300 acres that are right off the freeway and close to downtown Los Angeles. So that the city of Los Angeles takes a huge hit on that trade. But they don't actually directly put money into building it, which means that the Dodgers actually pay more in property tax to Los Angeles than teams with municipal ballparks pay in rent. So it was a better deal for the city in that way, although a worse deal in some other ways. But anyway, I talk about Dodger Stadium. It's this new style of construction. It has 7 tiers. It's totally about driving. You can't really take mass transit there. But I also was incredibly fortunate to get access to the private papers of then Dodgers owner Walter O'Malley. I have an academic colleague who wrote a book called City of Dreams, which is about Los Angeles and Dodger Stadium and making Los Angeles modern and big league and all of that. And he connected me with some employees of Peter O'Malley, who was the son of Walter O'Malley, the guy who moved the Dodgers to Los Angeles, who then owned the Dodgers after his father died. And they possess and maintain Walter O'Malley's papers. So I wrote to them and I said, hey, I've been introduced by this guy who I'm writing this book. Can you send me what you've got?
That's incredible that they were just like, sure.
I know. I wasn't expecting that.
Even with the library in New York, too.
You can come here on your own dime, and we will look over your shoulder and give you what we feel like is appropriate. And instead, they mailed me 3 or 4 inch thick priority mail envelopes full of photocopied documents.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was really, really fortunate. And I assume they made editorial choices about what they were going to send me,
Sure.
right? As happens anytime that documents end up in an archive.
Mm-hmm.
But it was it allowed me to write that chapter as fully and richly as I did because I have those voices of Walter O'Malley, of Dick Walsh, of the people who worked on designing Dodger Stadium and what they were thinking about when they, were thinking about everything from how people are going to leave the stadium after the game to whether or not there should be a shelf in the ladies' room.
Wow. That really is something, just because you think about, I mean, have you been to Dodger Stadium before?
I feel like I shouldn't admit this on record, but no, I haven't.
It's an interesting place because it clearly now was designed for a different time in Los Angeles when perhaps it wasn't as car forward as it is now, even though then it was. But like, it is the worst kept secret in baseball that going to a Dodger game, if you don't go like 3 or 4 hours early to just get near it, you're going to be stuck in traffic, not get in till the fourth, and you're going to want to leave by the seventh so you don't have to do that same thing on the way out.
Yeah. And that is, weirdly enough, it is a byproduct of them trying to design it around the car
Mm-hmm.
because they were like, we're going to put it in a place where there is no mass transit and we're going to have all this parking. But what they didn't understand, right, is what it takes to get 16,000 cars into that parking lot amidst regular rush hour traffic.
Yeah.
But because they place it, and because Los Angeles's mass transit is what Los Angeles's mass transit is,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no viable alternative for people to get there, which would actually, if there was, it would be easier for folks to drive there.
Absolutely, yeah. It would just alleviate the amount of people in cars.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But because they were only thinking about the car when they opened it up, it actually is worse to drive to now than places where when they were thinking about multiple modes of transportation, it's not as bad to drive to those places now. Yeah. Byproduct of silly urban planning.
So, yeah, well, I mean, it seems like even today, it's funny that, that we're talking now only because in Chicago at the moment, there's a lot of fight with, and I'm sure that you can take what you learned in baseball and apply it because everybody kind of followed suit. Baseball was expanded, and then the NFL, and then the NBA, and all of them came along afterwards. But right now in Chicago, the White Sox are talking about wanting a new stadium, and their stadium that they have now does have public transportation and parking lots, and it gets knocked for having those parking lots because people now are like, well, it sucks, there's nothing to do around there, it's just parking lots in the middle of a Chicago neighborhood. And then you got Wrigley Field to the north that has been there for over 100 years, that has basically no parking lots and a red line, yet everybody seems to get there without complaint. It's so funny. And then you got the Bears talking about wanting their new stadium. They want public funding. And then the Chicago Fire, who are building their own stadium, privately funded it. It's just like the same thing keeps happening over and over since Dodger Stadium built with private funds, it seems.
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring up all of that. I mean, the White Sox, they're recycling the same moves and rhetoric that they used in the late 1980s.
Yes, they are.
It's literally like, we're going to draw a map of where our potential fans live, and look, they all live in the suburbs. It's like, no kidding, there's a huge body of water on that other side. Of course, everybody lives on that side of you, because they don't live in the water.
Right, or Michigan.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's so it's also, as much you were talking about the differences between the neighborhoods around where the White Sox are and the neighborhoods around where the Cubs are. And that has as much to do, I think, with the demographics of the neighborhood and people being comfortable with them. The White Sox, they want those parking lots when, quote unquote, New Comiskey opens up in 1991, because it functionally serves as a wall that separates the fans they want to draw from the people who live by their stadium.
Absolutely.
And now that's seen as a detraction. But if that parking lot wasn't there, they'd be complaining, oh, no, the neighborhood around us is so depressed. Our fans don't want to go there. It's not what they want. It's some of it, yes, is true that the White Sox would like stuff around them, theoretically stuff that they own and therefore also profit from, because that's the real trick. But it's also as much who lives right around that ballpark and what demographics of people fans are comfortable hanging out with or interacting with on the streets around the ballpark.
Right. And that's kind of not kind of that's what you dive into where certain baseball teams that are building, ballparks, even like Camden Yards, when that became like what you're talking about. We're going to go back because we figured out this whole suburban thing, because we want to listen to the affluent white male who's spending the money, who we like their dollars. So we're going to create these tiers. We're going to create these luxury boxes or the box seats, because that's truly the pastime of America. Like, we don't need to have people don't want to mingle, which baseball prior was like, the garbage man next to the CEO high-fiving each other at a baseball game and they could get along. And
Right.
is that just owners wanting more money and saying this is what our fans want, or is it just society now with everything you can do you can order food from your phone at a lot of ballparks and they'll bring it to your seat, or if
Yeah.
you want to pay for a hot dog, you can't use cash anymore, you have to use a credit card. Like baseball, and there's ABS in baseball, like it's fully electronic within the game and the ballpark experience. I sound like an old
Yeah.
man, but you know what I mean.
No, I do know what you mean. And so there are a couple of things going on there. One, then the garbage handler was never sitting next to the banker. That's a myth, right? Because of those constraints that we talked about, right? Because there have always been field box seats, because of, the garbage handler was working 6 days a week. There weren't games on Sunday.
Oh yeah.
That direct interaction, that was never really happening. But the other thing you're talking about, right? Is it owners wanting profit? Is it what their fans demand? It's sort of a chicken and an egg thing, right? Are the owners correctly surmising that they'll lose fans if they make the game more accessible and egalitarian? Or are they just putting their own prejudices onto this and thinking, well, I wouldn't want to do that?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I don't have an answer to that. I don't know which one it is. It could be both, but it's somewhere within the owners thinking I wouldn't want to do this, and fans actually voting with their feet or their dollars and saying, I'm not going to go if I have to interact with people I don't want to interact with. That's where the answer lies, is somewhere within that.
Well, that I understand that logic for sure, especially back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s. But a lot of stadiums now, they are either downtown now, or you have older ones like Kansas City that is going to move, but they move, like the Metrodome closed, and now you have their ballpark in their downtown. So do you still find that that's still the case? Or Truist Park in Atlanta, they were kind of downtown, now they're out in a suburb. They kind of did the reverse of like everybody else, but then everybody wants to create a Wrigleyville. That's what St. Louis did. That is what Milwaukee is doing, who also built in the burbs. Just like, and you go to Milwaukee, you're like, why didn't you build it down there by the water? Why the hell did you build it all the way out here in the middle of nowhere? There's no train to get to it or nothing. So is that still the case, though, with people not wanting, at least from what you've seen in the research that you said, people not necessarily want to intermingle anymore? Or is that now just kind of faded with history? And now it's just like about fan experience, quote, fan experience. Like, how much money can I pay to get these cool seats?
It's a little bit, I'd say that process of copying and modeling is actually a little bit cyclical. So Camden Yards opens up, and Janet Marie Smith, who's in charge of the development of Camden Yards, and then she's a hugely influential figure in the contemporary baseball fan experience, because after she works for the Orioles and is like basically executive in charge of overseeing the whole construction, she goes and she works for the Atlanta Braves, and she's in charge of Turner Field. She redoes Fenway Park. She goes back to Baltimore, works on Camden Yards again, and now for the last 10 or 15 years has been working for the Dodgers. So she's hugely influential in this. So, but when she's opening up Camden Yards, she says, well, we're going to make this feel like Fenway Park or Wrigley Field.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she goes and works for the Red Sox, she's basically making Fenway Park more like Camden Yards. And what I mean by that is Camden Yards has Utah Street, this formerly City Street that's now part of the ballpark where their concourse is.
Yep.
Right. And it has these big wide concourses underneath the stands. And when she goes and she works for the Red Sox, she expands the concourses at Fenway Park they take over what I think used to be a car dealership that was adjacent.
Yeah, right? For sure.
But they close off what is now called Jersey Street, which was then called Yawkey Way. on game days, turning it into their own version of Utah Street. And all of the changes that have been happening at Wrigley Field over the last, let's say, 15 years are trying to make it on par with places like Camden Yards and Fenway Park and all these other modern ballparks.
They keep trying. They do.
Right?
I live in Chicago. Yep.
Yeah. And the Ricketts acquisition of all, the rooftop stuff that's all around it, right? Yeah, that's kind of copied by the Ballpark Village in St. Louis and by what the Braves are trying to do out in Cobb County with the Battery, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a one directional sort of, we're going to steal this idea. The ideas are going back and forth in multiple directions, and they're all influencing each other in that way. But in terms of are they downtown or not downtown, we're sort of at a crossroads for that, right? The recent ballparks, the Braves they got the heck out of downtown. That was an accessible mass transit accessible place. They had a free shuttle that ran from a MARTA stop.
What was their reasoning? Was it just that it was too difficult to get to for people that lived in the suburbs to get through downtown, or they just want something fancy and new?
It's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of the White Sox argument of there's nothing around here. Not coincidentally, what was around Turner Field was a whole bunch of black neighborhoods. And the fans that they wanted to draw were not living in black neighborhoods. They were living in the suburbs. So the Braves really, I referenced this earlier, when the White Sox were trying to get municipal funding to build New Comiskey, they had this map. And at the center of the map, right, was a circle. And at the middle of the circle was where Comiskey Park was.
Mm-hmm.
And the map, I can't remember if it was a 15-mile radius or a 20-mile radius, but they showed where all the ticket purchasers were. And of course, there's, no one in the lake and everybody else out in the western suburbs.
Sure.
Right. The Braves basically did that same thing where they showed a map of here's our ballpark, here's Turner Field, it's at the center. And if we go out a 20-mile radius, all our season ticket holders all live in the suburbs. It's well, yeah, because to own season tickets, you have to be wealthy or at least upper middle class. So of course, all of your season ticket holders live in the suburbs. And they use that map to justify moving out there. But you can't ignore that map is basically reiterating the effects of residential segregation and redlining and years of housing discrimination in Atlanta and reproducing that same thing. And the Braves, in their description of why they did this, they kept saying things like, well, it's always safe here. You can leave your car 24/7 and not be worried about it. Their fans were much, they didn't use coded language nearly as much. Let me put it that way. The fans were a bit more direct. So Cobb County is not accessible via MARTA. And MARTA is like the Atlanta version of the L, right? It's their trains. It runs everywhere. Well, not everywhere. Runs many places.
Mm-hmm.
And Cobb County in the 1960s, they voted against funding a MARTA extension because they didn't want it accessible to people who lived in the city. And people who lived in the city by the 1960s was black people in Atlanta.
Yep.
And then again in the 2010s, they again voted to reject doing this.
I guess Cobb County is an affluent area of...
It is an affluent area.
Yeah.
Now, like any large county, it has its variations, right?
Mm-hmm.
But overall, that's its situation. And, one of the county executives said any money that's about transportation for this ballpark, it's all going into roads. It's not going into connecting mass transit to the city. And you've got fans saying, well, I moved out of Atlanta because I didn't like mass transit and I didn't like the people who rode mass transit. So that's why it's good the Braves are moving out here, because there won't be people riding mass transit because I don't like those people. So it's that, it would be a really lovely, simple story if it was straightforward and there's just one answer. But it's really this mix of answers of they see it as a way to make more money and they see it as a way that's going to make their fans more comfortable. And what seems to make their fans more comfortable is ballparks in neighborhoods where everybody looks like them.
And that happens to generally be folks that look like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been going on for the better part of 150 30 years?
I mean, it's never sort of not been going on in
Yeah.
professional baseball. There are times, when Jackie Robinson debuts in 1947, right? A third of the fans in ballparks in some cities when he's playing are black. And that makes owners really uncomfortable. In 1946, even before Jackie Robinson is playing, right? He's playing then in AAA for Montreal, but in that league with Montreal, there's a team in Newark, New Jersey, there's a team in Baltimore, and the owners are looking at this and they're saying, "My God, when he plays in Baltimore, half the fans are black. When he plays in Newark, half the fans are black. If we get black people in the major leagues, half the fans at the Polo Grounds are going to be black. Half the fans at Yankee Stadium are going to be black. Half the fans at Comiskey Park are going to be black, and then our white fans aren't going to come." Mm-hmm. So it's been that direct historically. Now, no one is going to use language exactly like that today, but historically, it's been that direct. And the way black fans have been described and depicted and treated before and after integration makes it clear that institutionally baseball has not always been interested in making everyone feel comfortable and welcome, even if they'd love to sell tickets to anybody with money.
Yeah.
They don't have the interest in making everyone feel comfortable in the same way.
And that, yeah, I mean, you go to any baseball game now, and you can, if you're just an observant person, you can look around, and it doesn't really even matter what city, you look around, and it kind of looks the same generally from city to city. Now Los Angeles is, maybe a little different because they have a huge Latino population, but and same with South Florida. But there's nobody going to games in South Florida, really, And up until this big wave of investment in the Dodgers, they weren't selling out like they are now. So yeah, it's interesting to even in like cities like St. Louis, that is a diverse city, but Cubs play the St. Louis Cardinals all the time, and I've been a Cubs fan since I was old enough to know baseball. And I've been there plenty of times, and it is what you see. It's just the same everywhere. Which I don't know. Like, is that in your findings when you're doing all this research and finding these papers that people are just handing over or at the library, which is incredible that those are still there and archived? Is it the same, or have you seen it? Is it played out for almost every major American sport, without like being the expert that you are in this area?
Yeah. So I obviously don't look quite as closely at my research, my direct primary source research isn't into other sports as much.
Right.
And I think that your points about it being the same, it's certainly the same in the most expensive seats, right? I think where you start to get some of that diversity, right? Dodger Stadium Pavilion, Dodger Stadium fifth tier up behind home plate, I think it's going to look different than what we see on TV. And you talked about Miami a bit, right? They have like a band that you can hear. You may not see anybody in the ballpark in Miami, but next time you're watching a Cubs game in Miami, listen for the band. You'll hear them. That's not something that happens at most other ballparks. It's just a bunch of fans who bring a bunch of instruments and they play in the outfield. But those expensive
I've actually
seats,
seen that.
Yeah, those expensive seats, yeah, you're right. That's all the same people. And, so we didn't really talk about the Astrodome, and it's actually quite relevant here. So the Astrodome is the first place that has what we would understand to be skyboxes, right? It's got luxury suites up at the top. And when the owner of the Astros, the guy who's really pushing everything about the Astrodome, he's not an engineer, but he's really the sort of interior decorator, let's say, of the Astrodome. Roy Hoffines is his name. And Hoffines is an interesting guy. He was a former mayor of Houston. And when he was mayor in the late 50s, he advocated desegregating some public facilities in Houston. And to get the Astrodome constructed, he has to promise the National League that it won't be segregated. And he leverages that promise to get Black Houstonians to support the bonds to pay for its construction. And before that stadium opens, hotels and restaurants in downtown Houston are desegregated because Hoffine says, well, we can't have Willie Mays staying in a separate hotel from Willie Mays' teammates.
Right. Yeah.
But in designing the Astrodome, he's thinking in designing those skyboxes, he says, and this is, it's not quite an exact quote because I haven't committed it to memory, but it's really close. He basically says, we couldn't go with some color blues in the skybox seats because we wouldn't want women looking pasty. Because he can only envision white women in the skybox seats.
Oh man, yeah.
Right? And we understand that maybe with our 2026 eyes and ears as biased, right? But that kind of baked in thing with someone who is actively committed to desegregating his facility, but yet can't envision that people of color would be in the most expensive seats.
Well, and it's almost like he's thinking of it only from a person that looks like him point of view of what desegregation looks like, right?
Exactly.
Did he bother to ask anybody else though, or he just think that he was the expert? That's, gosh, man, history does repeat itself, when you hear about things and, things like that. You mentioned the different tiers at Dodger Stadium. We haven't talked to that much about it, but those tiers were designed for that reason, like they call them nosebleed seats because, at a time when you're designing a ballpark, and if you're somebody like this gentleman here, like maybe, well, the suites are for these folks, and then we'll have these upper decks where we can have all the folks that don't have as much money, they can sit up there. It just so happens to be most of the folks that I'm talking, that not me personally, but he's talking about are people of color, right?
Yeah.
And same thing in Los Angeles, and same thing in every ballpark, that was old enough. Wrigley Field certainly had an upper deck, and I mean, Wrigley Field's a little bit of it's an odd ballpark because when the Cubs were bad in the 60s, it wasn't like the way it is now since I would say the mid 80s, where it's just been full. But baseball, and I'm sure you've noticed this, baseball has this way of looking back on its own history with rose-colored glasses. Even the color barrier with Jackie Robinson that you've spoken of, but just the story of in kind of our parents' lifetime of Houston desegregating to be able to host the Giants, a National League team, in their city of Houston. To hear that today, you're like, what? But that's not that long ago. And that's what's incredible to me, is that this stuff's not that long ago. And yet those principles that built those ballparks and the way that we do things as people who go to baseball games, all of those rules or all of those ways about baseball were all layered brick by brick by that thinking 100 years ago.
Yeah, it's you can't divorce the current fan experience from its complex history.
No.
Right? It shows up. We see it in the location of the ballparks. We see it in the design of these ballparks. So all these Camden Yards ballparks, right? You talked about our parents' generation. All that era of ballparks, right? It's nostalgia for ballparks in the 40s and 50s. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Who else is really interested in nostalgia for things in the 40s and 50s, right? What's going on in the 40s and 50s? Who's not interested in nostalgia for a segregation era? Who is that nostalgia not going to appeal to? Who might it turn off?
Yeah.
Right. But it's just so inherently baked in that if you are considered a baseball fan, you say, oh, well, that era of ballpark, that's superior.
Yeah.
Right.
That is what people think.
That's what we're told. That's what gets repeated. That's what the model is put out in front of us. And unless you really stop and think, okay, so what was actually going on in those ballparks? How were people actually being treated at that time? You miss the fact that this current experience, which, despite understanding all the problems, I like baseball. I like ballparks. I like going to the games. It means something to me.
Me too.
I describe it somewhat jokingly that I have an academic brain and a fan brain, and sometimes I can separate those two things, and other times I can't.
Well, it's hard not to. I mean, if you're a baseball fan that follows a team, you kind of wear your heart on your sleeve sometime, right? And that leaves you up to being vulnerable and, and looking back on nostalgia. Who's your team?
I'm a Phillies fan. I grew up in Philadelphia.
Okay, Phillies fan. Yeah, long-suffering Phillies fans up until recently, right? Yeah. They've been pretty good, although this year is a little rocky. But they got a Yankee and they're managing their team. How do you feel about that?
It seems to be working. It's weird that his son is his boss. That's the weirdest part about it for me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he managed other teams, right? He managed the Dodgers, he managed the Marlins, right? So clearly he's gotten away from that.
Yeah.
But the idea of a father working underneath a son in that way is confusing to me.
Well, baseball wouldn't be baseball with a lot of little nepotism.
Yes, that is true.
You know what I mean? I could talk to you all day about it. It's fascinating stuff. And, I'm curious of what you think of baseball now, as the fan experience now going forward, as like the money always seems to be an issue. And I feel, and this is, I have a decent job. I can afford things, but I now, as a 46-year-old man who has 3 children who want to go to a game, you can't go to a baseball game, at least in Chicago. And I know it's different in maybe the South Side right now, as the White Sox are just starting to rebuild. But typically a big city, you're not going to a baseball game and paying under $50 for a ticket. You're paying $75, $95 for a ticket. So a family of 4, you're not walking out of a ballpark all said and done with parking and everything for $500.
Yeah.
And you're listening to the rhetoric of the owners and the players right now talking about money, right? And you're like, God, how much more money are we willing to spend on watching something we love? You know what I mean? And it's, as I'm getting older, it's getting increasingly harder to justify the spending. Like, it's not that I don't have it. I mean, I don't have it to go every day, certainly, but I have it to go like maybe once a month or every 2 months, and hopefully you find something on a cheaper alternative site if the weather turns crappy. But like, as it lays now with the foundation that we've talked about and the way that baseball is, do you see baseball being the game that we know today 20 years from now?
Baseball has never been what it was 20 years in the past at any date. Ever. Right? It has this image of being unchanging.
It does, yeah.
But every time you look at baseball's history, one, people have always complained that it is dying. It has been dying.
Oh, yeah.
Since the 1870s, when people started getting actually paid. Oh, baseball is dying. And people complaining of, oh, baseball's not what it was 20 years ago. The experience isn't what it was. The players isn't what it was. That's constant. People complaining that baseball isn't the same is a constant. But it's always been changing. And really, it's been changing for a long time in ways that make more money for the owners.
Yeah.
Recently, in ways that make more money for the elite of the stars.
Yep.
And maybe not so much for the average player. You're seeing, I'm a big Rhys Hoskins fan because he was our one good guy in those lean years for a long time.
Yeah, I remember
him. He
seems
like a really good human being and, that kind of thing, right? Like, he just got like a $1.5 million 1-year contract or something like that with Cleveland. I don't even know, right? Here's a guy who's, 800 OPS for his career, that kind of thing. Good clubhouse guy, right? So it's not becoming richer for all the players. I can't tell you what it's going to look like in 20 years.
Hell, what will it look like next year?
Yeah, I don't think we're
right. There's a lot of people who are
going to have much baseball next year unless cooler heads prevail or something like that. But what drives me, what really irks me about it is there's so little that we can do as fans about it. Right? Well, like I can tell you as a fan, like, you want to make the game more inclusive. Okay. Next time you see someone at the ballpark who doesn't look like you, don't assume they're ignorant. Yeah. Just talk to them like you would any other fan.
That could be a life lesson for anybody at this point, right?
Right. But like, I've read so many accounts of super, super knowledgeable female fans going to games and being like, well, the usher thought I didn't know what a ball and a strike was. And when I drag my male partner who's not a baseball fan, everyone is asking him, how did you get your wife to come to the game? And the actual answer is, really? I dragged him to the game. Yeah. Right? This is my game, right?
Are we past that? My gosh.
We're not. We're not, right? And so I can talk on end about how those personal interactions that fans can actually control can reshape the experience for individual people. But those wholesale changes of how do we make the game more accessible? If you don't have to drive, that helps, right? That helps lower that cost. If your team is terrible, it's cheaper. That's always good.
Yeah.
But otherwise, minor league baseball, I don't know, right? Baseball to me, the owners to me, and this is less an academic opinion than more of a fan opinion,
Mm-hmm.
are more interested in short-term profit over long-term success.
Oh, of
You go
course.
back through the history of baseball, and they did a lot, owners, in letting kids in for free often, because they're
Mm-hmm.
like, that's the next generation of paying fans.
Yeah, I heard stories about that all the time at Wrigley Field. They would let the ushers would let them in after like the
Right.
game started all the
But
time.
even formalized programs, right? So I have my students at Manhattanville where I teach. They do in my class on fandom. They do oral histories with senior citizen sport fans. So we bring in some senior citizens who talk about. In this case, one guy was talking. Well, I joined the police athletic league as an 8-year-old, and they gave you this green pin, and they told us, on this day, you put your green pin on, you go to Yankee Stadium, you get in for free. And what the kid realized, he's now 92 years old. What the kid realized was that every day they let different PAL chapters in for free. So if he showed up every day with his green pin on and just walked right in, no one would stop him. Right? So it's an institutional thing. And then he becomes a committed baseball fan. Or you could collect box tops, and you could use box tops, right, to get in for free. And you don't see people doing that, right? Now you got to pay $100 to join the kids club, and then we'll send you a certificate when you go to your first game. Right? There's just no interest in fans who aren't already middle class or above.
Well, isn't that's I mean, some have argued that that's the problem with baseball not getting to where it used to be as the dominant sport in America, because it has like shun people, right? Like they have made it not easy for people who don't have a lot of money to go to a Major League Baseball game. Hell, I went to this Sacramento A's game. I don't even call it Sacramento A's, the A's in Sacramento. I went to a game there last summer, and that wasn't cheap. It was expensive to go to that. It was like $65 to sit in a minor league stadium, arguably watching a minor league version of the A's, for that portion of the summer. So, even then, and then they like give everybody the proverbial finger by not letting them call themselves the Sacramento A's when they played in Sacramento. It's just so like, that's so baseball. And like baseball's been a part of my life forever, which I guess is what you're arguing. But like baseball is so baseball. It can be infuriating, but you also love it at the same time. And when your team does well, man, oh man, you forget about all the problems of baseball. But when your team sucks, like a lot of my friends who are Southside White Sox fans up until this year, in the last 5 of the debacle that has been what has gone on in that organization, they complain about everything, and people have argued, well, like Bridgeport doesn't suck. Bridgeport's one of the nicest neighborhoods in Chicago now. It's the team that sucks. That's why nobody goes. It's not because of the ballpark or the neighborhood anymore. The argument is like, if you guys have been consistently as good as the Yankees, people would figure out, they go to the Bronx, they would go to the Bridgeport, So it's, it's always that argument. But like, I'm curious of like the future of baseball in regards to the cost, because you've seen it with like the regional sports networks folding up, because the demand that they thought they had isn't there, because they've so much marginalized and segregated their audience to what they thought it was. Now they're finding out, if your team sucks, nobody's going to pay the $20 a month to watch your team on your subscription model that you have now, because you lost your regional sports network. I mean, even the Cubs have had that issue with Marquee. Up until this recently, they've laid off a lot of people there because people aren't just watching. So it's interesting. That's all I'm saying. We can talk forever. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So just a quick thought that came up as you were talking about that. I don't think that you can ascribe baseball no longer being the most popular sport to only reaching out to the wealthiest people to come to their games, because every major sport in the United States does that. Right.
True.
Football does. Right. So that can't be the only reason. But if baseball wanted to regain that, offering cheaper tickets absolutely would be fundamentally a part of that.
Yeah, even as a kid, I remember if you got like A's on your report card in Chicago, you got free White Sox tickets. If you made the honor roll, you got free White Sox tickets. And that's when the 90s, when they were good. You know what I mean? Like they don't do that anymore. Like it just seems like and maybe it's every sport, but we're talking about baseball. But it seems like baseball, nothing is like that anymore. Like the whole baseball apple pie America vibe, especially for America 250, like the baseball part of that equation is just not that version of it anymore. It's more about corporate sponsorships, luxury seating, group outings. It's not about like a family going to a baseball game. Now it's about
Yeah.
corporate outings and stuff like that. And maybe that's just the way baseball survives, is by the corporate dollar versus the home dollar.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things about it is baseball owners are extremely economically conservative, and they always have been. The
Mm-hmm.
guys who aren't economically conservative, Bill Veeck,
Yeah,
we know them. We know all the stuff they did and
sure
how
did.
instrumental they were, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the bells and the whistles of Bill Veeck, right? Of Ted Turner,
Yeah.
right? Who, he
Rest in
couldn't get
peace.
people to go for a long time, but like, he did stuff, right? He made stuff happen. He invested, he tried things, he did things differently from everybody else. There's so much groupthink in that group of people where somebody in New York gets a lot of corporate accounts because, well, I wonder why. Maybe there are a lot of corporations in New York.
Mm-hmm.
So now every other team is like, that's how we do it. Like, well, you don't have Milwaukee, Fortune 500 companies on every corner. That's not your solution. Your solution, they could make it cheaper for you to get to Milwaukee. Not that you would change your fandom, but they could make it cheaper for you to get there than it would be to go to a Cubs game.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
They could get you maybe to do that. But they're not really thinking that way.
No, and it just because it's not the model, right? There's not even, like I was saying earlier, there's not even public transportation to their stadium, which is insane, from downtown Milwaukee, where you can take a train from Chicago to Milwaukee. But
yeah,
I digress. We can talk about this all day, but I will not take much more of your time. Seth, thank you so much for just talking some baseball and
thanks, Tom.
Interesting history. I mean, baseball it very much reflects the history of America, where it is not perfect. It's never been perfect. They try to be perfect. They might even tell you that they are perfect, but they certainly aren't. But you can't help but loving it anyway, right? I mean, baseball is baseball, and there's nothing quite like summertime baseball in America, and enjoying it. For anybody that loves it and makes the effort to go, whether it's expensive or not, it is what it is, and I guess the only people that can really do something about it is fans who, one day they're like, I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to go. That will really catch their attention. But until that actually happens, or if they don't forgive him for going on strike next year, because the 94 strike really did some damage, but
it did some damage.
It did.
I remember being heartbroken.
Oh, me too. White Sox were really good that year, and Chicago they did not forgive that team until they won the World Series in 2005. And talking about, the owners and the short-term money, that is exactly what happened in 2005, because they did not sustain success after that. And neither did the Cubs really after 2016. They tried, though. They just were the Cubs. They're the Cubs. They're, they don't have that Philly luck that you guys seem to have.
Oh, we don't have any luck. Well,
they didn't take them. We gave them away. That's what we did. We were idiots.
If you give us back peak Ryan Sandberg and peak Fergie Jenkins, maybe we can have a conversation.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I am talking to a very knowledgeable baseball fan, so I will appreciate that, and I will take my terrible argument. I'm going to run. But Seth, is there any do you have any book signings coming up, or can people follow anything you do in regards to the book or any other your writings?
Absolutely. So my website, pretty easy, SethTannenbaum.com. I'm on Instagram, Seth S Tannenbaum PhD. I'm on Blue Sky, Seth S Tannenbaum. I think you can just find me. There aren't too many people on Blue Sky. No book signings in the Chicagoland area, sadly. I'll be doing some Sabre presentations. So if your listeners are Sabre members, cool. I'm going to be presenting as part of their Eras team presentation on June 24th. Talking virtually to, I don't know when this is going to air, but I've got a virtual talk on May 18th. Probably won't air by Monday. And some in-person ones in various places as well. If anyone is going to be in Bethany Beach, Delaware on June 27th, I'll be at Bethany Books in Bethany Beach, Delaware.
Very cool. Lovely that time of year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool, Seth. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.